Okay, and we are live. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending where you're joining in from. Welcome to today's Guest Talks webinar. For those of you who aren't familiar with GESS, we are the Middle East's leading education exhibition and conference. You can find out more about both of our editions taking place in Saudi and Dubai. There should be a little pop-up appearing on your screens shortly. In today's webinar, we're going to be tackling a very, very critical question that is facing the education sector across the GCC. So that would be, how do we design and build school campuses that remain relevant for the years to come? As the region accelerates investment into education and workforce transformation, school leaders, developers, and governments are dealing with how to create future-ready learning environments, which is exactly what our panel is going to dive into today. We have a little Q&A feature. If you'd like to submit some questions for our panelists at any point during the session, we'll try our best to address all of them towards the end. And without further ado, let me hand you over to our amazing moderator for the day, Kumar, to introduce himself, the topic at hand, and our amazing panelists. Over to you, Kumar.
Thank you, Maha. And thank you, everyone, for being over here. Like Maha said, wherever you are in the world. I'm here from New York City, basically on summer vacation, but I'm glad to be here. So this topic today is designing the next generation schools in the GCC. So quick word on me, and then we'll get to the topic and the people you came for. My name is Kumar Verma, and I run a school group startup, Education by Design Group, and we're seeking to build the next generations of schools across the GCC. So everything we're discussing today is not theoretical for me. Before this, I spent 15 years leading Scholars International Group, one of the region's established school groups, where I remain a primary shareholder. And I also was the prior chairperson of the Dubai Education Business Group, which is an industry body for Dubai, which has more international schools than anywhere else in the world. So I come from multiple sides, and we're going to actually have a conversation today looking at multiple sides of this conversation and topic. And we've got some great panelists with us today. But let me start off by just having them introduce themselves before we start. So Guy, would you like to start first?
Sure, thanks, Kumar. So my name's Guy Collins Down. I'm Chief Operating Officer, Alleyne School. We're a school founded in 1619 here in London, England. But my background, I've been in education for over 20 years, predominantly in operating and designing schools. First out working in the Building Schools for the Future programme when the UK government was building lots of brand new schools, and latterly in the independent sector. So my thoughts on designing school environments have been framed from about sort of 100 plus schools that I've built over the years through those programs.
Thank you, Guy. Carla?
Hi, everyone. My name is Carla Davis. I am co-head of education at Zaya Education. We have recently opened Al Fanar School in Dubai, in Nad Al Shiba in Dubai. And it is the first alternative curriculum school in the UAE. And alongside the curriculum sits a very alternative building. Some of you may or may not be familiar with it. So I will be speaking about our pedagogy and in terms of how that's informed us to develop what we've developed and the kind of trials and tribulations that come with that as well.
Thank you, Carla. And Matt, over to you.
Hello there. Thanks for having me. My name's Matthew Foster. I'm the Academic Director at the Bishop Lloyd College here in Al Quwain, UAE. My role focuses on academic quality, curriculum development, university partnerships and institutional improvement. So I've been in education over 20 years, UK, UAE, China, Malaysia, Latin America. So I'm very interested in how sort of education institutions continue to learn and evolve, because we spend a lot of time talking about preparing students for the future, but I think it's equally important to look at schools themselves and how they continue to adapt as the world around us changes. Has Kumar frozen?
I think he might have.
Bear bear with us, everybody. Sorry, there's always a few technical issues.
Yeah, there's a triangle.
I believe he's just rejoining. If we can just, give it a minute. He should be back with us very shortly.
New York City Wi-Fi. Shall I get us started, Maha?
Yes, I think that would be great.
Sure.
In the meantime.
So when we were looking at this topic of designing next generation schools in the GCC, a lot of this stretched back in my mind, having designed a lot of schools in the past, is that we design schools as schools, and that's fundamentally the place not to start. The United Kingdom has had an Education Act for 150 years, which stipulated children needed to go to school. And for those 150 years, we've been continuing to build effectively schools which look exactly the same. They are rectilinear boxes, which are designed for 30 children facing the front, where a teacher used to teach from a blackboard, but now teaches from a smartboard. Yet around us, the world has fundamentally changed. We have, AI is taking over the world. We have amazing factories. We have foldable phones. We have all sorts of inventions that change that, yet our schools don't stay the same. So my angle is we need to think about schools completely differently and think about what other sectors are doing. So looking at retail, if you look at the Dubai Mall, for instance, the mall on the outside is just a big industrial structure. On the inside is a place of wonderment, and that's where our children like to be. Whereas they don't necessarily like to be in school environments because we don't design it for them. So it was looking at, what actually are we trying to achieve for the future to make it resonate with children really in an environment they want to be in rather than being at school, because they spend most of the time at school rather than at home. And that's how I start thinking about it.
Guy, if I could just push back for a moment.
Yeah.
And I apologize, there was an echo. But when you look at how much capital a school group has and where they allocate it, the cost of construction is really high, and you basically are trying to figure out the best use of resources. How much money as a percentage of the whole bill do you think should be spent to FF&E? And do you think you can actually still give an IRR to the investors based upon that level of FF&E?
Well, I mean, to be honest, you end up spending, Kumar, a huge amount on the built environment. And typically fixtures, fittings, equipment is like the last thing to be added and the first thing to be cut from any project, which does leave you with a big shiny building, but that doesn't get pupils into your school. It's how they are welcomed by staff, how the pedagogy works, but also how they feel when they walk into the building. Kids feel great when they walk into shops and office and read sort of commercial environments, but they don't necessarily feel great walking into the school. So if you talk about return on investment, a full school is better than a half full school. So, and I think a lot of people expect sort of expensive interiors to be too expensive, whereas actually I would argue that spending less on your cladding of your building or large volume of spaces, large glass atriums, etc., would get you far more bang for your buck in terms of spending that on the paint you use, the chair that you sit on. Typically in a UK school, for instance, the chair that a child sits on will cost around sort of £20. It's a plastic Postura chair, which is great for posture, but the chairs that our teachers and our adults in office environments sit on is £150 a chair. So if it's acceptable for us to sit on that, but it's not acceptable for them to sit on the £20 chair, and we expect them to concentrate all day. And it's just small decisions like that. And I just think, yes, there's obviously returns that we need to make sure we make, but just because you're spending the money on interior doesn't mean it has to be any more expensive. It's just you've got to shop around a bit more. I don't know whether you felt that sort of with your environments, Carla, in terms of your interiors.
Carla, I think you're muted.
Oh. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so for us, when we were going through this design process, similar to what you were saying there, Guy, really thinking about where you're spending that money and how children are having the most amount of the best use of that money spent. So for us, it was thinking about our outdoor environments, and we have spent a lot on the nature, bringing in certain trees and growing certain plants, and to give children those experiences. But that was an active choice that we made as a school as to where that money went, in terms of the experience that we were giving children. And I think that actually I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but really having that understanding as a school, as a community, whatever you are building a school, thinking about how you are designing spaces that are really aligned with your values and your vision is actually a better use of money in the long term. Like you said, a half empty school is not as good as a full school. And so although that initial outlay might be expensive, staying true to your ethos and your pedagogy and making those design decisions based on that actually will get you better returns in the end.
So if I'm going to push this to Matt, who's actually Matthew, you're building something right now. How do you go about looking at the budget when you basically look at allocating money to either the construction or to the FF&E or to any resources for that? Is there some kind of methodology you look at in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it's just behind me. I can still hear them. They're just finishing the last bit of fixtures and fittings in and around the new laboratory. It's a mechanical engineering and electrical engineering laboratory that we've built. So I guess for any school or college, we haven't got, no one can really say we've got plenty of money, let's build whatever we like. The reality is, you're constantly making choices. When myself and the executive dean joined this college last year, we both agreed that we wanted to strengthen the engineering provision, and so because we're an applied college, so we were saying we need to prepare our students obviously for the industry, and our facilities need to reflect that. So that became our number one priority. And also, as it happened, the National Qualification Centre had visited, and one of their provisions was that we improve and increase our electrical and mechanical engineering facilities. So luckily it was already our number one priority, but just to bring to the forefront there, it's not always your own decisions that you're making. You're also having to fulfill other criteria, whether it's Ofsted, whether it's CAA, whether it's, in our instance, NQC. So suddenly we had this decision where we had to make it. It wasn't just something we wanted to do, it was also something that was part of the long-term strategy. So now, of course, none of that makes the financial side any easier. Obviously, every significant investment means another project has to wait, and obviously that's the reality of leadership. But what helped us was we kept sort of focusing on one key decision, and that was, and it's still on my whiteboard here, will this decision leave our students better prepared for the world they're going into, basically? So if our answer is yes, we want to protect that investment, and if no, then perhaps that can wait for the next phase. Obviously, as I say, we're still literally on the journey. Our current campus is right for what we have now, but of course then we need to reassess once our students' numbers start to grow next academic year, not this coming academic year. What we've had to do is, I suppose, I'd describe our financing at the moment as sequencing rather than cutting. So some investments obviously are fundamental to our strategic direction, but others have simply been phased over a longer period, basically. So we're semi-governmental, so we do have some support, but of course, like any growing institution, managing the investment strategies, really a real juggling act. Oh, sorry, Kumar, I think you're on mute.
I'm on mute.
Can hear you.
I'm good now?
Good.
Yeah, Matthew, you talked about engineering, and I know that in our organization, 10 years ago, stuff like IT, for example, was not even a line item. Now it's a massive part of our P&L. And I know that, Carla, you're engaging a school that, is in a way questioning the use of IT within the school environment and the use of technology within the school environment and getting more back to basics, which is an interesting way to approach it. Can you explain your thinking behind that and why you're looking at designing a school that is actually in a way against the grain, if that would be a good word to use?
Hello, sorry, keep forgetting my mic's muted. Yeah, definitely. So let me talk about, I touched on this earlier, but let me talk about it in a little bit more depth. So when we were going through the process of designing Alphanar School, because we were very kind of clear in our philosophy and our pedagogy, we are underpinned by Waldorf pedagogy, which traditionally doesn't use technology until children are developmentally ready for it. Around 12 to 13 years old is when it would generally be introduced in a Waldorf pedagogy. So we always, when we were designing the building, had in mind that actually technology was not going to be part of our offering for our early years and primary children. And again, like I was saying earlier, having that very clear values and approach in your head when you're in that design process is something that's really important. I think that's what gets lost in a lot of school design kind of processes, because the educators and the people that are holding that vision, the founders, aren't necessarily there through that design process. So we were obviously in a very lucky position that our founder built the school herself. So we were part of that whole design, from the beginning to the end of that design process. But having that very clear vision, I'm not saying that every school shouldn't have technology in it, but having that very clear value that stands with us is why we made that decision, and meant that we could design our campus from that. In terms of the reason as to why we believe that this is the right way for Alphanar, like I say, it's not going to be for every school, but because we really hold child development as one of our core values. So making sure that we're designing spaces that meet the child developmentally where they are. So when you come into somewhere like Alphanar, understanding that in your early years, it's very kind of homely, very enclosed. Young children really need those enclosed spaces in order to feel safe. Young children don't thrive in those big open spaces. It's actually very overwhelming for them. And you see that a lot in a lot of schools in across the Middle East, those big sports halls that, 3-year-olds walk into and just kind of start shaking because it's way too big for them. So creating those spaces that are very small for our early years children, so it really feels like that home for home environment. Then moving up into your primary years, thinking about it really developing more of that social cohesion, more of the physical movement that children really need at that age. It shouldn't stop when they finish early years. They still need to have lots of spaces to climb and to grow things and to dig and to take risks. They need to do all of that when they are in those primary years, not just when they're under the age of 4. So for us, having that in mind through our design was more important for us than the technology. So when we were making our design decisions, it wasn't about where are we going to put a whiteboard screen. We want our children, for us in terms of child development, we want our children to be present. We want them to be connected. We want them to grow the inner child and their inner child development before we start thinking about technology. So for us, that was a design choice. So when we talk about not having technology, like I said, I'm not saying that every school in Dubai or across the Middle East should do this. I know some schools, they want to be really technology focused, but for us, having our core value as being child development and making sure we were designing spaces that were meeting a 4-year-old where they are now in the same way that it would meet a 4-year-old where they are in 20, 30 years time, because 4-year-olds are 4-year-olds and 8-year-olds are 8-year-olds. Designing spaces that meet their needs was more important to us than designing spaces that met the needs of technology. That will be different for every school, and that's why I say having that real core understanding of what your values are as a school is really important when you're going through that design process.
Thank you, Carla. And I think the last 10 years for sure has been such a push to enabling tech in every single space, from having the smart boards to the iPads in every classroom. And now I do see a bit of a backlash to the amount of tech we are facing as schools. And I think a lot of that backlash is actually coming from parents. We've seen the whole thing about, no screen time. A guy, I know that you've also had an interesting approach to how you use tech in your schools. How do you see that competition happening with what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the UK, we're just about to have a mobile phone ban, for instance. So, we're very much going the other way on technology. And I think you're right, Kumar. It was about having the latest iPad, everyone having a one-to-one device and computer screens everywhere. And now we're almost going back to basics. Our approach has actually been more having a network as a backbone for everything we do, because the actual hardware will change so rapidly. It's almost pointless focusing on that. It's focusing on how to make technology improve our learning environments. So we believe quite fundamentally in the marginal gains of classroom design. And that's everything from the air quality through to the CO2 levels, to the noise and the vibration levels. And to be able to understand those things, you do need a smart network, a network that's adapting and changing. And you need a network that's strong enough to be able to take effectively Internet of Things. And you can imagine with the amount of classrooms and devices, it's like having your Alexa in your classroom in some ways. It's helping the teacher to understand you need to open a window, or the temperature in this room is too much, or it's too loud in here, put more acoustics in. And some of the studies we've done, interestingly enough, we installed lighting in our history classrooms, which adjusts to your circadian rhythm. It's a smart technology. It's a small cost on the sensor that changes the light. That adjusts throughout the day because our bodies are not geared towards LED lighting. It gives us headaches. It stops us from concentrating. And the history grades bumped up by 2% following that year's worth of trial, just from a basic of using our smart network and our smart school to make some very, very minor change that cost very little on the bottom line. But in terms of the outcomes it had, was phenomenal. And I'm now able to look at my network and go, hang on a second, my A-level classrooms need to be the best environment for learning, but I'm timetabling in the spaces that perform the worst environmentally. And I can only do that with a really robust network with the sensors connected to it. And a lot of our focus as a school at the moment is trying to innovate around those areas. And I see effectively the future of school environments, as we see in commercial sectors, is having the data for teachers to make sensible decisions from. And without that network, you can't have that data. It's not about having the latest iPad. It's about getting the best environment for the child. And that's the way that we've approached smart technology.
And just in terms of that, Guy, do you have any research or any case studies which show that there is an improvement on learning outcomes, which is actually the ultimate goal of a school, is to show that learning, whether it's academic or creative or social, whatever those learnings are happening. Is anything to say that this money is spent is the most efficacious way in terms of improving those outcomes, because people can obviously spend in different areas? IoT and all of those things have shown to be somewhat expensive to implement. Is there a tipping point where you're like, you know what, it now makes sense to spend money in these areas because the costs have come down, or that learning outcomes are showing to be really fruitful?
Yeah, I mean, the sensors themselves are very cheap. That stuff's not, the expensive stuff is the network up front. Now, luckily for most schools in the GCC, you're building from scratch. So actually that is a sensible investment to make, because you have all the catenation in the right places. You have the ability to put your servers in sensible locations. I'm on an estate of 23 buildings varying from 1-year-old to 150 years old, and they're all Victorian buildings. So it's much harder for me, but it is the most sensible investment decision in any new project to get that network working correctly. And as I said, that history example is one. There was a great study in California where they surveyed 29,000 children about the thing that had the most impact on their learning, and wasn't the educators, it was HVAC, which is personal comfort levels. So we're currently in the United Kingdom at the moment with a 34-degree heat. We're not built for that. And our learning levels have gone down. My concentration is not as great because I am uncomfortable. And getting the optimum learning environment is the investment you require. And I tell you, it's hard to measure results in education because of the time frames, but happy children with strong attendance levels, participating in all activities, will bear fruit. And word of mouth has been really interesting as well, that parents know that we take it seriously and they're choosing us over other schools.
Okay, thank you, Guy. I mean, one of the things about building a school is that you're not really building in isolation. You've got multiple stakeholders.
Yeah.
One of the stakeholders, for example, are the regulators. Now, I know, Carla, when you're doing your school, it doesn't really fit the mold. So what do you see as the regulatory challenges when you look at building a school? How much of that is part of the consideration versus an afterthought? And what would you recommend to people when they go through a process of building a school in terms of how much they account for the regulatory environment?
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and obviously different places have different challenges. We're based in Dubai in the UAE, so we fall under the KHGA, which the UAE does have very tight regulations, as I know lots of other GCC countries do. It does have very tight regulations in terms of building quality, outdoor environment, safety has been an ongoing conversation. So I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easy and you can design a campus and it will just get the box ticks, because it's definitely not that. It's a process. And I think actually really understanding, like I keep going back to, but really understanding the why as to why you've designed the campus in that way, when you know it's the right decision for the children, helps you to formulate your kind of your philosophy as to why you've designed it in that way. And then having a really strong compliance team that are able to walk you through that process is also an absolute godsend. I think for us, having been, like I say, in the luxurious position where our founder built the school, she has her own construction company, she has her own team that are able to be there at my beck and call when suddenly an inspector walks in and they want to know something about the building quality. Being able to have that team that we're able to pull on, and with the kind of construction expertise as aside for the education expertise, does make a big difference. So I think in terms of investors, to go down that road, you do need to have a not even just the architecture side, more the kind of setup side from the construction side, and that facilities team and operations team that will be with you through that journey to make it seamless. Because you do get a lot of questions, you do get asked lots about, and there will be things that you have to compromise on. There are things that we wanted to have that we just haven't been allowed to have, and that's okay. So we have to kind of make those compromises where we have to. But yeah, I think that having that really strong compliance team and really knowing the regulations and what you can push and what you can't push is the key. And ultimately, everyone wants the best for children. So if you can articulate and show the safety side of things and have all of the the paperwork to show them exactly why these things in place, they're more open to having the conversations. I think when Dubai Municipality first walked in and saw our outdoor areas, they were like, oh my goodness, how is we going to ever allow this school to open? And there were some things we had to change, and it was to the wire, and it is going to be to the wire. I didn't have a permit to open the day before the school was due to open because they're doing all of those final checks. So it is to the wire, but that you've done it for the right reasons. And when you can see the children thrive, and when they now come and see the children in those environments and using them in that way, actually they're seeing the benefits of why risk taking is so important, why having animals on site is so important. They're starting to see those environmental decisions that we made come to fruition because we know it's right for children and for child development. So I'm not saying it's easy, but having a really good ops and compliance team who are with you through that whole journey makes a huge difference to be able to have those conversations with regulators.
Thank you, Carla. And I'll push this over to Guy and Matthew as well. When one builds a school, there are so many stakeholders involved. And I want to get a sense from either of you, in terms of how you approach it, do you engage the other stakeholders as part of that conversation, whether it's the parents, the future students, or is it something where it comes from the top down? And do you think there's a better way to do it in terms of having a bit more, you wouldn't say more chefs in the kitchen, but do you feel there's more value in having more engagement with other stakeholders when you go in through any kind of design process? Guy, if you want to go with that first, and then I'll throw it to Matthew.
Sure, thanks, Kumar. I mean, we live by consultation here because buy-in's super important, particularly to some of our philosophical conversations that we put to parents. We have parents forums, we have pupil forums. We're going through a big design project at the moment here for a brand new experimental dining building where we're trying to sort of reinvent the way that school catering works. And we've got a very live, active student committee on that. We put direct questions to them. We recently had one project where we were redoing toilets. I know that sounds like quite a basic kind of conversation, but I had 3 hours of consultation with children on bathrooms. I've never seen children more engaged in conversation about buildings than about the toilet environment. We ended up with a brilliant product that feels very much like home, that was designed for them. When we opened it, we even had a ceremonial flush. There were 150 children turned up to watch these sort of toilets be opened as a facility, and that just shows it really works. I think often we're afraid of asking questions of our community and getting their feedback, but feedback does come from a place of love and understanding, and we don't always agree with it, but that's our prerogative to ignore it or not. And often, we do only put forward 3 things that we already like, which gives that feeling of consultation. But it's been a road. I would definitely encourage anyone to speak to all your stakeholders, because again, looking at bottom line, if you want to sell the product and have full schools, you need to have people that are giving you the feedback to get there.
Thank you. Matthew, anything to add to that part?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating, actually, Guy. Brilliant levels of consultation there. I guess for us, it was because we're applied college and I'm surrounded by engineers, right? So we have mechanical, electrical, civil engineers, we have architects here. So for us, it was very much starting with our academic staff, with what we actually needed, because we had quite a clear blueprint of what we wanted and what we needed. So basically, we had them carefully look at everything in terms of the program specifications, awarding body requirements, and how then we're going to shape the space, as well as Carla was pointing out as well, all the other regulations that we have to follow. So obviously we had a lot of people around the table, but thinking about it, reflecting now, it probably would have been good to have brought in perhaps a student / parent committee as well, because we are looking to improve our community commitments as well, as we see ourselves as a civil responsibility there. So because we want our space not just to be for the students that attend, but also a sort of a community space as well. So yeah, so for me, the consultation, obviously it's not a one-off event before we build, it's a sort of an ongoing conversation. Even once it's open, we're going to be continuing to gather obviously feedback from our staff and our students, and then as well, of course, our industrial partners as well.
So one of the things I used to do when I used to build schools in the past was I used to look at great best practices blueprints of what you could do, and I used to always kind of defer to the UK school building codes and what they did in terms of ratios and things of that nature, and then obviously apply the regulatory requirements we have in our own country. But when you guys look at approaching any project, you can't, I mean, in a way, you can't say I'm just winging this. You basically say I'm going to base this on some best practice. Or so do you basically look at any third party best practice or research, or do you basically leave it to the consultants and designers, whether it's the size of the classroom, the ratios, the flow of the school? What do you guys all use as your, I guess, your knowledge base when you're looking at school design? Start with Carla. You want to go first?
Yeah, so for us, it was mainly looking at kind of alternative provisions around the world and seeing what works in those. It's hard to find alternative school buildings. So we had our architects who were hired, but our founder did a lot of her own research actually and visited a lot of schools around the world to just kind of really see what was working and not working. I think that for us, because our founder is in kind of real estate and development, she already had a lot of the knowledge in terms of the kind of construction and design side of things, so it was a little bit different for us. But yeah, I think certainly looking at more best practice around the world, but also looking outside of the box in terms of what schools can look like. I think when we think of schools, we think of a building with four walls, and I don't think that schools are going to continue to be buildings with four walls for much longer. So I think actually, like Guy was alluding to at the beginning, not even just looking at school design, but looking at space design. I know that, you know, in Japan they're doing some amazing things even with their early childhood centers, really looking at not always a traditional school building, but how community spaces, how spaces can be used around a city in different ways. Thinking about all of those things around the world, I think, can really open your eyes to the fact that a school doesn't necessarily have to just be in one building in one place. And so looking at other industries, I think, is really important as we move into this next chapter for education.
Thank you, Carla. Guy?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I mean, there are building bulletins, you know, so the UK building bulletins are very strong. Luckily, independent schools, we don't quite have to comply with them, but they're a good sort of building block. We have had to invent a new thing. We've got something put in the All in Alleyns. It's our new inclusivity overlay. We work with the specialists that designed the Royal Institute of British Architects inclusivity overlay to create the first set of school principles on design around designing schools for inclusivity and neurodiversity. But what I have always made people do when we think about this is go on immersion days, which is go and look at other locations. And I always suggest you pick a residential option, a commercial, a leisure, and a civic building. So go and see an office, go and see a museum, go and see a shopping mall, go and see a bit of office environment, just so you can see what others are doing. Because some of these environments, obviously not offices, but they are doing a really good job for children, very successfully, because that is their business. Yet we're not learning from them. So what tricks do they do? What have they learned, and how have they put that in place? And what can we then learn? Because probably the worst thing you can do when you're looking to build a new school is go and visit a school first, because you're just visiting something someone else has done. Whereas you need to sort of move it forward. And if people in the GCC are going to design schools for the future, you need to look at what's working outside of the sector to now.
Thank you, Guy. Matthew, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, probably just a little bit on, because we're applied college, industry plays a more and more important role for us. So we spend a lot of time looking at market trends and speaking with employees and industry partners, understanding the skills, you know, that they're looking for, and try to see where the sector's heading. And because, you know, so touching on what Carla said and what Guy said, you know, we're in a really interesting period now in the world of education. And I think as we know it, as we have known it, is changing, and I don't think it's ever going to be the same. So we're constantly trying to think, our students that come through, they come through a 4-year program with us. What's the future going to look like for them? What's the world of work going to be looking like for them? So we're constantly trying to evolve, trying to stay ahead of the curve, and that's easier said than done. But ultimately, we're trying to bring all of these perspectives together, because obviously education and innovation shouldn't just be driven by what's new, it should be driven by what's needed. So, you know, comes back to that same question of, will this decision leave our students better prepared for the world they're walking into?
No, Matthew, I just want to pick up on something you've said, and I've heard this common theme from Carla and Guy as well, about how education is changing and how we got to look at everything needs to change as well, and how the world is changing. Schools are massive CapEx projects. there's a lot. I mean, in fact, the biggest impact on our return is the cost of construction. And we expect a building to give us, I mean, financially, we look at a 25-year depreciation scale, but it's actually a lot longer than that. And if we're spending all this money, you're saying the world is changing, then I mean, in a way, that's kind of scary in terms of, is that investment going to something that's going to be no longer functional or useful? So to all of you, and I'll start with you, Carl, is like, I mean, how do we even go about designing a building, or do we even need a building if the future is going to be so different? Like, how does even one grapple with that conversation about the fundamental change in how we operate and study and learn and live our lives, with the fact that we're building massive capex 30-year projects with the building?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question. I don't know if I'm going to be able to kind of give it the justice it needs, but I think that really honing in on kind of, like I said before, not thinking about education in such a traditional way, and thinking I was on a conference last year in Japan, and it was a range of educators, kind of all up in the mountains, where people who ran amazing schools from all around the world were there. And it was really interesting when we started talking to people from India and from America and all these people that were doing different things. What it actually came back to when we thought about how education was going to look in the future, there was a big feeling of community and how the community is going to hold I'm calling it a school, but I don't know if it looks like a typical school, but how a community is going to work for families, for children, for educators, and it's going to feel a lot more holistic. And I think that can feel really abstract when I'm saying it like that. But when you're thinking about investment, I think thinking about your approach and your pedagogy and your values of what you want children to learn and come out with, like you said at the end, what is your end kind of goal of where you want children to be, having that really strong is going to help you with that design of school. Because I think that, I don't know if, like I said, those four walls are going to be what schools look like, but thinking about how schools are working together. So have you got the Green School are doing amazing things in certain places in the world. You've got High Tech High that's doing amazing things. You've got all of these schools around the world doing amazing things. And how are we going to, with AI now, how can we bring those expertise together to give an offering to children that isn't just, if you come to this school, you just get this one thing. So actually using each other, using community, finding spaces that work, in different places in a community, I think is going to be more the way that we see education going in the next kind of not 10 years, but maybe 20 to 30 years time. So yeah, I would say invest in spaces that can be used for different purposes, because your school might not always be used as a school. It might be used as a learning hub. It might be used as a community centre. It might be used by the government for things. So thinking about your space that's multi-use, that's not just your traditional school building, is probably something that I would recommend to investors if they're thinking about longevity.
Okay, thank you. And Guy, anything from your end?
Yeah, Kumar, it comes on to reconfigurability. We all think, obviously, with AI that we're all going to have AI tutors and everyone's going to be sitting in these sort of little silos in front of screens being taught individually. And it's like, that's just not the case. I think the way schools will go is, as Carlos is, much more community-based, because human connection is the basis of everything. Technology will support that, of course. But what that does require, of course, is different types of building. So I would be looking more, when I'm doing construction, at what sort of commercial and retail is doing. So if you think about a traditional office environment, you get a big building that gets put up and it has an open plate with a central core, but the rest of it is completely reconfigurable. And most retail and office businesses will design their budgets around 7 to 10 year refurbishments. So they spend less on the estate and more on the ability over long term to change things. And some of the stuff that we're looking at is exactly as Carlos said. Like, we may end up having WeWork environments for our parents in our schools, where we have office environments for them to come and work in. We may have community libraries. We may have just whole sections of the site we turn into residential. It's just, but if we build buildings that are literally 60 square meter rectilinear boxes with fixed walls, you're going to be spending more money in the long run. So it's thinking very carefully about how adaptable your building will really be. because it will be something different in 20 years, even potentially 10. The pace of change, and so flexibility is key in how you design the buildings for the future.
Thank you. Matthew, if you want to add anything to that, please do share.
Quickly, Carla and Guy have made some excellent points there. For us, again, it's about those conversations. You constantly now, I feel more and more, my diary every week now is just chock-a-block with meetings, with industry leaders, with different stakeholders about, how can we, ready our students for the world they're about to be entering. We often get industrial leaders coming to us and saying, I'm getting these students sent to me, they've got this qualification, they've got that qualification, but they can't practically do what I need them to do. So out of all those conversations, what we're trying to do is build on competencies. Constantly trying to build on workplace competencies but in order to do that, we need to make sure that we're constantly staying abreast of what's happening in the world of work, especially in terms of the areas that we focus on.
So before I jump into the questions from the audience, I just want to have just a quick, to anyone who can answer this. You've talked a lot about flexibility in the building design. Has anyone engaged in any kind of modular technology when it comes to building, which provides some level of flexibility on their campus?
I'm just building one right now, actually, for my early years building. It's a much cheaper way to build. And in fact, last year I built a lodge at the front of our school. It's a security lodge. It's made out of it's a company called Block Build. It's OSB wood filled with amazing insulation with a structure around it. And it's been designed to be completely dismantled and moved. And funny enough, it's the 60 square meters in size. So it's a reception and a lodge now, but I can turn it into a classroom in the future. And it's a carbon net positive building as well. So I would encourage people to look at it because it's quick. And I'm a massive fan of shipping containers as well. Our podcasting studio is in a shipping container right now.
Brilliant. That's a great story. I'm going to jump on the questions right now. There are a few from the audience. I think the first one I'll throw out to maybe Carla. The question is, how can technology be used meaningfully in an early years classroom without replacing hands-on learning? I know that's a question I'm sure you faced within your own environment. Do you use any technology at all in the early years classroom?
No, we don't. And, it's a very, like I say, it's a school's choice. There's some schools that believe it's really important in early years. For us, because we go more by child development. We don't think that children are developmentally ready to have that at that age. We know that they have it at home, but when they're in school, we really want them to be developing kind of the sensory input, the imaginative learning, the making relationships. However, I think when I didn't really speak about this earlier, but I think that a big part of this conversation, and Guy did allude to it as well, around creating your environments, even though you might not use technology with the children, using a lot of technology in the background to support curriculum, assessment, teaching and learning, reporting to parents, is actually going to really support your practice in the early years. We know I'm an early years teacher myself by trade, and we know that a lot of our early years teachers are finding it very difficult to manage the workload between being present with the children, supporting them through those skills, through their play skills and all of those things, at the same time as tracking all of that, because there's no test for them to take and there's no written work that you can assess at the end of it. So it is very observation based. And I think being clever in how you're using AI and technology to support your teachers to become more present and in the moment will then support your children, because they're not running around with an iPad trying to take a picture of 25 children, which is breaking connection, is not helping the children in any way because the parents want a picture at the end of the day. Actually thinking about how we're using technology to really inform teaching and learning, curriculum, environments, like Guy was saying, how can we use it to make sure that our environments are really giving those children, that particular class, exactly what they need during that period of time. Setting your provision up to do that is going to be more impactful. So for us, even though we don't expose children to technology in the early years, we have a very strong use of technology in the background for our teachers in order to support that teaching and learning that happens for the early years children. I don't know if that answers the question, because I am someone who would say that we wouldn't, I don't encourage technology use for early years children in schools. I know everyone's different, but for us, we use it on the teacher side instead.
Fair enough, Carla. Thank you. I'm gonna paraphrase the second question. This is for you, Guy, and I think you mentioned something about inclusivity. Can you explain to the audience in terms of how does one reflect a more inclusive? How is inclusivity reflected in a classroom versus a typical, say, standard classroom? What will be the kind of difference that you would see in saying this classroom has been built for inclusivity in mind?
It's a good question, and actually, you shouldn't be able to see that it's designed any differently because inclusivity is for all. But some of the points we have made within the overlay, and we did some test classrooms last year, for instance, is very subtle. It's like things like acoustic. So there's different sciences behind this. Girls and boys hear at different frequencies, for instance. So getting an equal acoustic across the classroom is super important, because a female teacher teaching a boy sat at the back, they hear at very different frequency. So we use something called Wool. It's a very cheap product. It looks expensive, but it's the cheapest thing on the market. That's on all our ceilings. And what that does is gives an even acoustic across the classroom. We have an ergonomic chair. So the chairs are designed for everyone, but they give a solid back, but they have an ergonomic stance to them. They're comfortable. The lighting is even on every desk. So it's been designed that every child has the same lighting experience. And then small things for us is like directional. So for instance, our flooring is all laid in a herringbone pattern, which is effectively a triangle. Not only is that the angle of our brand and our A, but also it happens to be a pattern that works really well for kids with neurodiversity and ADHD, because it provides structure and direction. And it's small things like that. And it's strange. You shouldn't really see that design, but every small little nugget we've thought about. And it's incredible going in that room versus another classroom, because it just feels very, very comfortable. So it shouldn't be obvious, but it really means you have to sweat the small stuff.
Fair enough, Guy. Thank you. A number of questions are about use of technology in the classroom environment, which I know that a couple of you feel a bit reticent about having as part of a big exposure. But I'm going to throw this to Matthew in terms of if given the advent of AI and the whole conversation on AI, Matthew, what do you see the role of tech in a school environment being, and how would you be most effective in its deployment?
Yeah, I mean, it's the $1 million question at the moment, isn't it? I'm actually just putting together my proposal for my PhD, and a lot of it centres around AI and how we're going to use it, and how it's not going to get, trying to not have it abused, but used for the right reasons and for the right ways. Because just yesterday, I was in a meeting with the head of Pearson, who we use for our HNDs, and we were talking about how can we combat, because as you can appreciate, the applied stream is a lot more assignment based, so it's a lot more open book, it's a lot more coursework that they can do at home. But now with the advent of AI, it really changes the whole way we approach it. So we're looking at how we can have not necessarily controlled exams, but controlled environments. So, and listening to what Guy had to say there about the way he's designing his classrooms, I've made so many notes there because I think if we're having our controlled environments, I would very much like to embrace some of the things that he was just outlining. But yeah, I mean, in terms of AI for the institution, though, I think it can be phenomenally helpful. Certainly in terms of, as we've touched on, data gathering, which of course is more and more and more important as we move further into this century. So it's just about making sure that we're using it correctly. I would never tell my students to not use it, for example, for research, things like this, but when it comes to assessments, it's a massive no-no for me.
As we are coming to the tail end of this webinar, I'm going to put you all on the spot, and I want to just to tell me a great design initiative you guys came up with, and one where you basically, for want of a better word, screwed up, and like I don't know why that I did that. So, Carl, I'm going to start with you. Can you throw something that you're very proud of that you did on a design basis in designing a school, and one way like we really we really messed that one up.
Yes, I can. So for me, it's our outdoor spaces that I'm kind of most proud of. The way that they've been designed, the flow, the way that children are immersed in a busy city like Dubai in nature is something that's not easy to design in that way. That we've created so many pockets of spaces that can be used for so many different purposes throughout the day. I think it's really clever the way that a 2-year-old can access those spaces, and in a different way to an 11-year-old can access those spaces. So the design of the outdoors and how that works is something I'm really proud of. And I think that, utilizing those outdoor spaces in somewhere like the GCC where it's so warm can be really difficult and people are quite scared of it. So doing that, I'm really proud of it. I would say that our design challenge was definitely the design of our dining room. And I think, like you said, Guy, you're trying to do something that's a little bit different. They are just, I mean, we've repurposed it now because it's not what it's not doing what it needs to do, and we will have to build again in the next couple of years once we've actually really sat with it and designed it in a way that feels a lot clearer to us, because it felt very conveyor belt like, and it felt not the community space that we would love it to be, and doesn't represent the rest of the ethos of the school. So outdoors, definitely proud of. The dining rooms are really difficult. Eating spaces are difficult.
Guy?
Probably the worst one was my first year in this school. Actually, we did a sixth form refurb, so for our older students, and I think our mistake there is we thought we knew what they wanted, and that's what we designed, and it wasn't right. And they've basically socially engineered it in a completely different way themselves, which is the way it should be. Yet the most successful, that classroom refurb is a great example of that. It was done fully in consultation with teachers and with pupils, and we've ended up with something quite wonderful. So we talked about it earlier today. Do talk to the end user, get an idea of what the requirements are. Ask yourself 5 times why you're doing something, and then you'll get to the real reason. And then you should get a good result. So, listen to your stakeholders.
Thank you, Guy. Matthew?
Yeah, kind of similar actually, in terms of it was a near miss mistake, and it was on the new build now. And we were all pretty much ready to rock and roll and go and send in the construction team. Then one of our mechanical engineers spotted that our windows were too low. Had we designed it the way we had intended, and we were just about to press the button on it, all the machinery would have been blocking all the light in the building. So a near miss avoided there. But again, make sure you involve all your stakeholders, because there's things that you think you know and you think you've got it right, but you're usually missing something.
Thank you, Matthew. As we come to this conclusion of this webinar, I think that 2 things that I get out of this in terms of what people should consider. One is intentionality. I think that every one of you has said in one way or another, know exactly what your vision and mission statement is for the building and the education as the basis of how you build and design. And that allows, that in a way becomes your North Star, your compass in how you direct all your actions when it comes to design. So that intentionality is something I heard very loud and clear. And the other thing I heard, which is that you've got to have some level of fluidity in how you think about it, because the building you're designing may be used in other ways that you do not even imagine at the moment, just because of the way life is moving. And if you build your environment in a way that is stuck in time, then even if the building's still operationally effective, it may not be functionally valuable in X period of time. And I think that both those things came out very clear from every single part of that conversation that we had today. So I really want to thank all three of you for taking the time today to get this wonderful topic discussed in great detail. And I really appreciate, our host over here in FOMA in making sure that this all happens. So without further ado, I'm gonna push this over to Maha for any final concluding remarks.
Thank you so much. Definitely, this was a great conversation, great questions, great discussion, a lot to think about and a lot to unpack there. Thanks so much, Kumar, for moderating this discussion. And thank you so much to our panelists as well for bringing your expertise. Before we wrap up, we have a very exciting announcement, which is actually very relevant to today's discussion. We're launching a design and build conference on the 12th of November at Education Investment MENA. So this is going to be a new initiative which brings together the full ecosystem that's driving school development currently across the GCC. So definitely super relevant to the conversation today and definitely exciting place to be. If you have any follow-up questions whatsoever, this is for the audience about the webinar, guests, or design and build, just drop us a message at marketing@guesteducation.com. You'll also be redirected to a short feedback survey when the webinar ends. So please let us know how your experience today was and if there's any other topics you'd like us to cover. That's about it from my end. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.